We are so fortunate here on Hometown Living to have with us the incredible Hulk, but really the incredible Lou Ferrigno. Thank you so much for being with us, taking the time out of your busy schedule this weekend.
The year was 1978, and a terrified 21-year-old bodybuilder stood on a Hollywood soundstage that smelled of spirit gum and latex. Lou Ferrigno, deaf since childhood, couldn't hear the assistant director shouting positions. He couldn't catch the whispered technical jargon floating between crew members. The cameras hummed around him, silent to his ears, but vibrating through the floor beneath his feet. Everything was painted green. The walls, the props, even the marks on the floor where he was supposed to stand. He'd won Mr. Universe. He'd conquered stages where judges measured perfection in millimeters. But this was a language he didn't speak. A world where he felt more alien than the character he was about to portray. Then Bill Bixby walked onto the set. Not the director, not the producer, just the co-star. A man who'd already lived multiple careers, weathered Hollywood's cruelty, and learned that success meant nothing if you climbed alone. Bixby was 44, seasoned, carrying the weight of experience in every deliberate movement. He didn't see a rookie bodybuilder pretending to be an actor. He saw a young man who'd overcome impossible odds just to be standing there, someone who needed guidance, not judgment. What happened next would define not just a television show, but two lives forever intertwined. Lou Ferrigno has spent decades being asked about the Hulk, about the fame, about the muscles and the makeup. But when he talks about Bill Bixby, something shifts in his voice. A reverence reserved for the people who fundamentally change who you are. Because behind the green paint and the ripped shirts, behind the ratings and the reruns, was a relationship that transcended Hollywood's typical mentor-protege dynamic. It was about one man carrying another's dream on his back, even when his own world was collapsing. The question that haunts everyone who knew them: what kind of man does that? What was Bill Bixby really like when the cameras stopped rolling and the persona fell away? After 40 years of silence, Lou Ferrigno is finally ready to tell the whole truth. Bill Bixby's origin story begins not with Hollywood glamour, but with a slingshot and defiance. As a boy in San Francisco during the Depression, young Wilfred Bailey Everett Bixby III did something that foreshadowed his entire life's philosophy. He shot a slingshot at Grace Cathedral during a sermon. Not out of malice, but out of rebellion against arbitrary authority. The bishop was pontificating about obedience and respect, and something in the hungry kid sitting in those pews snapped. The stone didn't hit anyone, but the message was clear. Rules that serve power instead of people deserve to be challenged. His childhood was forged in hardship. His father, a store clerk, was largely absent. His mother struggled to keep food on the table as the Depression squeezed every family in America. Young Bill knew the shame of poverty, the humiliation of worn clothes and empty stomachs. But instead of breaking him, those years built something unshakable: empathy. He understood what it meant to be overlooked, dismissed, counted out before you even got a chance to prove yourself. That understanding would later manifest in how he treated every crew member, every struggling actor, every person Hollywood's machinery tried to grind down. The boy who challenged the bishop became a teenager who challenged television's shallow formulas. While other actors chased fame, Bixby chased truth, emotional authenticity in a medium that preferred pretty lies. His Depression-era hunger never left him, but it transformed. No longer hungry for food, he became ravenous for meaningful work, for stories that mattered, for characters with actual souls beneath the scripts. There's a haunting image that those who knew him young recall. Teenage Bill, standing in that same cathedral years later, light filtering through stained glass and painting his face in fractured colors. He'd returned not to apologize, but to understand. Staring at those windows, he realized something that would guide his entire career. Rules mean nothing if they crush the human spirit. Authority without compassion is just tyranny in a suit. And television, he decided, didn't have to be mindless entertainment. It could be something that touched people, changed them, made them feel less alone. That revelation, born in hardship and rebellion, would eventually save a deaf bodybuilder from drowning on a Hollywood set. The transformation from Wilfred Bailey Everett Bixby III to Bill Bixby wasn't glamorous. It was survival refined into art. After a stint in the Marine Reserve, where he learned discipline that would later define his directing style, Bixby made his leap. He bought a $75 bus ticket to Los Angeles with money he'd saved working at Detroit's Roosevelt Hotel. The city welcomed him with indifference, as it does to thousands of dreamers every year. He slept in 8-week rentals, bounced between jobs, survived on whatever food he could afford, and studied acting like a Marine studies tactics. This was the crucible. Every audition felt like combat. Every rejection was ammunition to work harder. Bixby didn't have connections or family money. He had hunger and an almost pathological work ethic. He took every role offered, no matter how small, because he understood that Hollywood's hierarchy wasn't about talent. It was about persistence and the willingness to outwork everyone else in the room. While other actors complained about the grind, Bixby embraced it. The Depression had taught him that comfort was a luxury. Success was a necessity. His calculated risks paid off in increments. Small roles became recurring parts. Recurring parts became series options. He studied not just acting, but camera angles, lighting, editing, every technical aspect of television production. He knew that if he wanted control over his career, he needed to understand the entire machine. This wasn't arrogance, it was strategy. The industry chewed up actors who only knew how to perform. It respected those who understood the business. Then came the break that changed everything. My Favorite Martian, in 1963. Suddenly, Bill Bixby was a name people recognized. The struggling hotel worker was now on television sets across America. But even as fame arrived, something darker began to crystallize in his mind. He'd achieved what he wanted, but the cost of Hollywood success was becoming clear. The scripts were often shallow. The work was repetitive. And fame, that thing everyone chased, turned out to be a spotlight that illuminated everything you wanted to keep hidden. His momentum was building, but so was his understanding that climbing to the top meant confronting truths that most people spend their lives avoiding. The 1960s and 70s were Bill Bixby's era of mastery. He worked with Elvis Presley and Clambake, bringing legitimacy to what could have been disposable teen cinema. He starred in and directed The Courtship of Eddie's Father, a show that shouldn't have worked. A widower raising a son, navigating grief and hope in equal measure. But Bixby made it work because he refused to pretend. Every scene carried emotional weight. Every line had to feel true. He learned to direct during those years, observing veterans, asking questions, and eventually taking the chair himself with a confidence born from understanding every technical aspect of production. His perfectionism became legendary on sets. 5-day shooting schedules, 75 camera setups per episode. No rehearsals, because he believed actors performed best when capturing genuine first reactions. It was exhausting for everyone involved, but the results spoke for themselves. Bixby's episodes had a quality that transcended typical television. They felt real. His Marine discipline had found its purpose in Hollywood's chaos. While other directors accepted good enough, Bixby demanded excellence, not from ego, but from respect for the audience. Off camera, he was warm, funny, genuinely interested in people's lives. Crew members loved him because he treated them as collaborators, not servants. Actors trusted him because his direction came from empathy, not authority. But on camera, standards were non-negotiable. Kindness fused with control, creating an environment where people pushed themselves beyond what they thought possible because they didn't want to disappoint him. That wasn't manipulation, it was leadership. By the mid-1970s, Bill Bixby could have coasted. He'd achieved success, earned respect, built a career most actors would kill for. But coasting wasn't in his vocabulary. He was about to take on a role that would define not just his career but his entire philosophy about what television could be. And he was about to meet a co-star who would need everything Bixby had learned about compassion, teaching, and carrying someone through their most vulnerable moments. The stage was set for something that transcended entertainment. It would become a masterclass in human decency. In 1977, CBS executives pitched Bill Bixby what they thought was a simple concept: a superhero show based on Marvel's Incredible Hulk. They expected camp, colorful villains, comic book aesthetics designed to sell toys and capture the Saturday morning crowd. Bixby listened politely, then told them no, not to the show, to their vision. If he was going to do this, it wouldn't be another throwaway superhero romp. It would be tragedy. It would be about a man haunted by something he couldn't control, running from himself, searching for peace that might never come. The executives hesitated, but Bixby's track record spoke for itself. They gave him creative control. The pilot episode set the tone for everything that followed: rain-soaked highways, piano music instead of heroic fanfares, a lonely scientist carrying the weight of accidental monstrosity, wandering America like a ghost. Bixby rewrote superhero television in a single night of filming, transforming what could have been spectacle into something that ached with human vulnerability. Dr. David Banner wasn't a hero. He was a broken man seeking redemption. That shift changed everything. Then came the challenge of casting the creature itself. After considering several bodybuilders, producers settled on Lou Ferrigno, Mr. Universe champion, deaf since childhood, zero acting experience. When Lou arrived for his first day, he was terrified. 3 to 4 hours in the makeup chair transformed him into something unrecognizable. Green paint covered every inch of exposed skin. Contact lenses obscured his vision. Latex appliances made facial expressions difficult. And beneath all that, he couldn't hear the director's instructions, couldn't catch the subtle cues that other actors took for granted. Bixby watched Lou's first take from behind the monitors. The young bodybuilder was trying so hard, desperately mimicking what he thought rage should look like, overcompensating for his fear of failure. Most directors would have gotten frustrated. Most co-stars would have remained distant, focused on their own performance. But Bixby saw something else, a frightened kid who'd overcome impossible odds just to be there. Someone who needed guidance, not criticism. In that moment, watching Lou struggle beneath layers of green makeup, Bill Bixby made a quiet decision that would define both their lives. This kid would not fail. Not on his watch. The teacher had found his most important student. What happened next wasn't documented in official behind-the-scenes footage. It wasn't part of the production notes, but everyone on that set watched it unfold day after day. Bill Bixby became Lou Ferrigno's translator, teacher, and protector. Between takes, while others grabbed coffee or checked scripts, Bixby stood beside Lou and coached him through the emotional architecture of each scene. He taught him to feel dialogue through rhythm rather than words, to understand pacing through gesture, to use his body's natural expressiveness as a strength rather than viewing his deafness as a limitation. The technical challenges were immense. Lou's hearing aids had to be removed before the makeup went on, leaving him in complete silence for the entire shooting day. Bixby adjusted blocking so that Lou could see visual cues. He made sure lighting changes were communicated through touch or sight lines. When the assistant director got frustrated trying to communicate with Lou, Bixby intervened, not with anger but with a quiet conversation about respect and adaptation. The message was clear. Lou wasn't the problem. The production's inflexibility was. The physical demands pushed everyone to their limits. 3 to 4 hours in makeup, 14-hour shooting days in brutal heat. Lou wore contact lenses that felt like sandpaper after 12 hours. 1/3 of the original crew quit within the first season, unable to maintain the pace. Through it all, Bixby remained steady, the calm center around which chaos organized itself. He'd shoot his dramatic scenes as David Banner, then immediately shift to directing the Hulk sequences, coaching Lou through emotional beats that couldn't be delivered through dialogue. Years later, when Lou Ferrigno reflected on those years, his voice still cracks with emotion. He taught me how to act, but more than that, he taught me how to be a man. It's a simple statement that contains multitudes. Bixby showed Lou that strength wasn't just physical, it was emotional, moral, built from compassion rather than ego. He demonstrated that success meant lifting others, not climbing over them. And he did all of this while carrying grief so profound that most people would have collapsed under its weight, because what nobody on set knew during those first seasons was that Bill Bixby's personal life was unraveling in ways that would have destroyed lesser men. March 1st, 1981, shattered Bill Bixby's world. His 6-year-old son, Christopher, died suddenly from a throat infection that escalated into cardiac arrest. The child he'd built his life around, the boy who gave him purpose beyond career and fame, was gone. Bixby's grief was absolute, the kind that turns the world gray and makes breathing feel like an act of defiance against the universe's cruelty. Friends expected him to break, to take time away, to process the unprocessable. Instead, he returned to work within days. But the tragedy didn't end there. Less than a year later, his ex-wife, Brenda Benet, Christopher's mother, took her own life, unable to survive the loss of their son. Bixby received the news while directing. He finished the day's shooting, gave notes to editors, ensured everyone knew tomorrow's schedule, then went home to a silence that must have felt like drowning. The man who'd built a career on emotional honesty now had grief too raw to process, too profound to express, too heavy to share. Hollywood's spotlight doesn't dim for personal tragedy. Production schedules don't pause for healing. So Bixby did what he'd always done. He worked. He directed while shattered, masked unbearable pain with professional precision, and found his only relief in mentoring others. Actors like Lou Ferrigno and Brandon Cruz from The Courtship of Eddie's Father became surrogates, channels for the fatherly love he no longer had an outlet for. He poured everything into teaching, into guiding, into making sure that others didn't fail or feel alone. Those who worked with him during this period remember a man with exhausted eyes who never lost his kindness. On set, he was present, focused, still demanding excellence while providing support. But sometimes, between setups, they'd catch him staring into middle distance, and in those unguarded moments, the weight of his loss was visible. A man creating art to survive, using work as armor against grief that would have destroyed him if he'd stopped moving. Bill Bixby didn't just teach Lou Ferrigno how to act. He taught him, through living example, how to endure the unendurable with dignity intact. Even as grief carved away pieces of his soul, Bill Bixby's directing career flourished with almost defiant vitality. He helmed episodes of Rich Man, Poor Man, bringing the same emotional depth that characterized his acting. He directed The Magician, Mr. Merlin, and later episodes of shows that needed someone who understood that even comedies required emotional truth. Other directors treated television as a paycheck or a stepping stone. Bixby treated every project like it mattered, because to him, it did. His directing style became influential across the industry. Actors sought him out specifically because of his reputation. He saw inside the scene, as one performer put it. He understood subtext, motivation, the unspoken emotional currents that separated good performances from transformative ones. He pushed for realism over gimmicks, even in fantastical premises. If a script called for melodrama, he found the human truth beneath it. If a scene felt false, he'd rewrite it on set, trusting his instincts honed over decades of studying human behavior. His technical precision remained unmatched. He could call for specific lens choices, lighting adjustments, editing rhythms that other directors left to department heads. This wasn't control for its own sake. It was craftsmanship. He'd learned every aspect of television production precisely so he could execute his vision without compromise. And that vision always centered on making people feel something real, even if they were watching a show about magic or monsters or millionaires. By the early 1990s, Bixby was directing Blossom, a sitcom that should have been lightweight fare. Instead, episodes he directed carried unexpected emotional weight, addressing issues like addiction and loss with an honesty unusual for the format. What made this even more remarkable was that he was dying. Prostate cancer had been diagnosed, and it was aggressive. Most directors would have stepped away, focused on treatment, prioritized their remaining time. Bixby showed up to set, gave detailed notes, maintained his standards, and never once let his illness become an excuse for diminished work. His professionalism wasn't about martyrdom, it was about purpose. As long as he could create, he was alive in the way that mattered most. In 1990, Bill Bixby directed what would become a haunting farewell, The Death of the Incredible Hulk. The title alone carried weight, but nobody understood how prophetic it would be. The script called for Dr. David Banner to finally find peace, falling from an aircraft in the film's climax, a gentle death after years of tortured running. Bixby directed himself in those final scenes, portraying a man exhausted by his own existence, ready to let go. The eerie symmetry wasn't lost on anyone involved. Banner's final fall was mirroring Bixby's own fading strength. Lou Ferrigno prepared for the role with intense dedication, gaining 45 pounds to portray a more powerful version of the Hulk, driven by loyalty to Bixby's vision. Even as Bixby's health deteriorated visibly on set, he maintained his exacting standards. He'd frame shots, give performance notes, ensure every technical element aligned with his vision, then quietly step away to manage pain that must have been overwhelming. The crew worked in reverential silence, understanding they were witnessing something beyond a typical television movie. They were watching a man direct his own metaphorical death scene. The final Hulk transformation carried unexpected emotional resonance. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was about release. Years of running, hiding, suffering condensed into one last burst of strength before Banner's final fall. When they wrapped the last scene, Bixby didn't make a speech. He simply thanked everyone, ensured all footage was captured, and left the set with the quiet dignity that defined his entire career. Lou Ferrigno watched him go, understanding on some primal level that this was goodbye to more than just the character. The poetry of it remains striking. A man who taught the world to rage with the Hulk's fury also showed it how to let go with Banner's grace. Bixby's final directorial work wasn't about triumph or spectacle. It was about acceptance, about a man who'd lived with pain, finding permission to rest. Art imitating life, life imitating art, until the boundary between them dissolved completely. 3 years later, Bill Bixby would pass away from complications related to cancer. But his final lesson, how to face the end with dignity intact, was already preserved on film, waiting for the world to understand its full meaning. Decades later, Lou Ferrigno still calls Bill Bixby his mentor, father figure, and the most important person in his professional life. When he speaks at conventions or gives interviews, Bixby's name emerges not as nostalgia, but as gratitude, deep, profound, undiminished by time. Because what Bixby gave Lou transcended acting technique or career advice. He gave him proof that the world had space for people who were different, that limitations could be transformed into strengths, that someone would believe in you even when you didn't believe in yourself. The beautiful irony is that both men overcame silence, Lou's literal deafness and Bill's emotional isolation, through shared compassion. They couldn't have been more different on paper. The deaf bodybuilder from Brooklyn and the seasoned Hollywood actor carrying unimaginable grief. But on that green-painted set, beneath hot lights and impossible schedules, they found common ground in their humanity. Bixby saw past Lou's inexperience to the determination underneath. Lou witnessed Bixby's suffering and learned that strength meant continuing despite pain, not denying it existed. The set anecdotes have become legend among fans. Lou preparing an egg omelet between takes, only to have it stolen by a coyote that wandered onto the outdoor location. The two of them laughing until they couldn't breathe, makeup running, schedules be damned. Bill adjusting Lou's wig after a particularly physical scene, both of them exhausted but finding energy in the absurdity. These moments, mundane, human, real, prove that beneath the makeup and spectacle was genuine friendship. Humanity outlived the Hollywood artifice, surviving long after the show ended and the costumes were packed away. When Ferrigno says, "He'll always be part of me," it isn't a soundbite manufactured for cameras. It's truth spoken from the cellular level, the kind of impact that reshapes who you are fundamentally. Bill Bixby didn't just help Lou Ferrigno become a better actor. He helped him become a better human being. And in doing so, Bixby left a legacy that transcends television ratings or Emmy nominations. He proved that success means nothing if you climb alone, that the true measure of a person is how they treat those who are struggling, and that compassion, real, active, daily compassion, is the most powerful force in any universe, real or imagined. Behind every monster there was always a man, and behind that man, steadying him, teaching him, believing in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself, there was Bill Bixby. The green paint washes off, the fame fades. But what one person gives to another, that guidance, that faith, that refusal to let someone fail when they most need support, that never disappears. It lives on in every life touched, every lesson learned, every moment when someone remembers that they matter because someone else showed them they did. That's not a Hollywood ending. That's something far more valuable. A legacy built from countless small kindnesses, surviving long after the cameras stop rolling and the lights go dark.